Hey, folks, welcome back to the RECOIL Live podcast. I'm your host, Tom Marshall, and with me today is Aaron Quinn, the CEO of Cobalt Kinetics. How you doing this morning?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Good. Excellent. So let's dive right into it, man. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself pre-Cobalt Kinetics? And, what did you do before you got here?
The previous 10 years prior to Cobalt, I was in the pharmaceutical space. Mostly a consultant. I did a lot of data analytics and economics surrounding non-narcotic medications, and worked with doctors, manufacturers, and pharmacies to optimize alternatives to narcotics in each of their spaces. It's super unique, and so it's tough to describe. The last 2 years, I was actually worked as president of a national wholesale distributor. So that's probably the easiest one.
Okay. It sounds like a fair amount of number crunching either way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a pretty bold pivot from what you're describing to where you are now. What piqued your interest in Cobalt Kinetics specifically? Kind of what led you to go through that, like I said, from the outside looking in, what sounds like a fairly substantial change for you personally.
Mm-hmm. As Mike Pappas once put it, from drugs to guns, I've kind of just hit rock bottom. So, right in the middle of COVID, well, what we thought was the middle or possibly end of COVID at the time in 2020, my travel had been cut. In the pharma world, everyone, like the major manufacturers, just absolutely cut all travel, and so I was stuck on Zoom calls, and just the misery that was my previous career became even more miserable, outside of the fact that we have a property here in St. George that we use as a range. You've been here and been on that range, but I ended up just using that as my office, and we have great cell coverage out there, so I'd hotspot my laptop and I'd work there, and in between calls and just things that I would do, I ended up shooting a lot. And the more I did it, the more I was like, man, I don't want to be in pharma. Like I love guns. I've got an FFL, maybe I can transition and shift on that side. And then a friend called and said, hey, Cobalt Kinetics is selling a Connex box. They want like $3,500 for it. It's got Galotech. It's got gun racks in it. It looked good out at your property. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So called them up. I didn't even know Cobalt existed still. I had seen them years prior and saw it on a wall in 2015 and thought, man, I would never own that thing. And then I walked into that Connex box to look, and it's full of guns. And again, kind of wanting to make a transition, I asked them, like, are any of these guns for sale too? And they said all of them are. We're selling off the company. And I kind of looked and thought, okay, I'm not a huge fan of the guns, but like maybe there's something here. So I left, and I ended up buying one of the guns because I was like, I've never shot one. I'm at least going to go shoot it. And there was something about the way that it shot that piqued my interest. Like I hadn't shot anything like it. There were things I didn't like about it, of course, but I couldn't deny like what I was feeling shooting it. So I went back later that night, made him an offer, and it was an asset purchase. So I didn't have like access to records or anything like that. So the diligence period was a little bit, it was shorter anyway, but they accepted the offer, and 9 days later I signed the documents, and changed my world.
Man, that's crazy. It's like a just like that moment, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you watch that old TV show. It's like on Netflix, and you can buy it now, Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
Chris Pratt on there, he had a as Andy, he what was it that he said? It was like when they got married or something. He was like, I can't tell you how little thought was put into this, or something to that effect. Like we had no thought, and that was kind of how I jumped in. It was like spur of the moment and kind of right time.
Yeah.
Stars kind of aligned, and I'm like, you know what, I'm jumping in. I'm going for it. So
It's awesome. You made a mention of during COVID kind of getting out on that range, on that property, and shooting more and shooting more and shooting more, which kind of was that sort of like your really kind of your big step into shooting sports in general, or did you grow up around it, or how did that work for you? I mean, is this something that's kind of always been under the surface for you?
I think I was born with a love of all things weaponry. I've always been really into history. I grew up in Georgia, born and raised there, and Georgia has a rich history in, with the Civil War, with being one of the original colonies, and so history was really interesting to me, and wars were always kind of I don't want to sound like weird or like there's
You're just a
problem,
connoisseur of military history, maybe, as it
yeah,
were.
I think the logistical side and the problem solving pieces of war have always been intriguing to me, and I like puzzles. I like logistical problems that need solving, and that was just that it was unique to me from a historical perspective. I mean, history is basically written by wars and civilizations, and how the human interaction has taken place, and you see the progression of technology versus how problems are solved, and how tactics, and how each piece from ancient wars all the way up until most recent, you kind of see the human evolvement of through all of that.
Yeah, well, as they say, what's the expression? History is written by the victor. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like you said, conflict absolutely shapes the entirety of human history in that regard.
yeah. And I mean, kind of to answer your question, so I've I've always liked guns and knives. I didn't grow up around a ton of guns. My dad had a gun. He had a few guns, but he never really understood where my obsession came from. I mean, I think I got my first pocket knife at age 4 and have cut myself ever since. I got my first 22 at 7 or 8, and it was my dad's from when he was a kid.
Yeah.
I grew up and I lived in Kennesaw, Georgia, which is known as the city that has the law in the books that says every household must have a firearm. And I always thought that was super unique and cool. And we did. And, my dad was never, he was never anti-gun or wouldn't let me shoot it. I mean, from the second I asked him if I could shoot his handgun, he would let me. And so I always had access to it. I kind of look at it as, I'm not a very artistic person. And so paintings and drawings, they have no interest to me, but I always look at firearms and knives as functional art. And there's a uniqueness to them and a science behind it that is super intriguing. That handgun, by the way, is a 1964 Browning High Power T Series.
Wow.
And it's in
Nice.
immaculate condition. And So I think that kind of learning about that gun when I was younger, and one, its uniqueness, its rareness, and how my dad kind of just stumbled into it in a pawn shop in the 80s was awesome. But like, yeah, so I've always had a love for the firearm side. So I shot all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize that you grew up in that. I mean, I've kind of that there's always that, it's kind of well known in the gun community. I think it is about that law that Kennesaw has. And
Mhm.
but I didn't realize that's where you grew up. That's cool, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty, like I said, I've heard that story a couple of times, but never met anyone from there. So that's really cool. So yeah, okay. So it's like you said, you kind of grew up around it and grew up into it. I think for a lot of us, this is kind of a lifelong passion. And I would argue that's one of the things that makes the firearms industry so unique, is that I think it is chock full of people who are here because um, it's a passion industry, right? There's lots of people who are here because they have a story very similar to yours. It's just kind of like, oh, that interest was always there. I grew up shooting. There's a family connection to it, and I you know, not having worked in a ton of other industries, but having been around a little bit, um, I think that's, again, I think that's one of the things that sets this industry apart and makes it so awesome, makes it such a great space to work in, is that it is full of people who are here because they want to be here, because it's a passion. It's not what they do, it's who they are, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to do that too. You know, I told you my dad wasn't a huge gun guy. My grandfather was, and so the memories that I had as a young kid, you know, shooting with my grandfather, or looking at and learning about the guns from his era and that he had when he was a kid, and then he was a Navy guy, and so you know you look at your grandparents as heroes in general, but then when you can um you know hear that side of their story, I think it just drives that passion a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those, a boy and his grandfather kind of thing, right? Like that's a pretty unique bond. And um, so yeah, like I said, I hear, yeah, I'm fortunate to hear lots of stories from people like that across the industry that's their, hey, this was my introduction to it. I have very deep rooted fond memories of that are tied to firearms and the shooting sports and things like that.
Yeah,
And then here we are, and we wind up, we get bit by the bug, and
it doesn't
it's,
stop.
yeah, yeah. Once you get here, if you came in like you did from some other industry, I'd be willing to bet dollars to donuts now that you're here. It's like, yeah, like there's not anywhere else I'd rather be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, you know, there's it still has problems. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's still a business side, and you know, you get people that talk about how jaded the industry has made them, and I can see that. I can certainly see that, but it's I, I think the key for me over the last 2 years has been like to not let the passion die. Um, you know, I don't only shoot cobalt rifles now. I don't only, you know, think in cobalt when it comes to guns. Like I buy other manufacturers. I buy their ARs still. But I really got into buying older firearms and you know trying to maintain like the fact that yeah, life sucks sometimes, business is tough sometimes, and you know we have stressors, and I don't shoot all the time just for I can't remember the last time I shot for fun, but like having at the end of the day we're still around guns. I mean, we deal with guns every day, and I still get to shoot all the time. So you know, how could that suck?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that just like anything else, right? No matter how much we love it, when you make it a business, it's still a grind, and or it becomes a grind for periods of time, right? And there are stressors, and so kind of on that note, what would you say some of your biggest initial challenges have been in the last couple of years, in terms of taking over Cobalt, what the brand was previously, and maybe as a new business owner, what would you say some of your biggest challenges were kind of right out the gate?
um Not having uh you know, I mentioned before it was an asset purchase. prior, and so it came with IP, with patents, and a lot of inventory. So diligence side was super limited, and the challenges became, I didn't know the industry, and I didn't know who to ask, where to go, and so you know, I had no intention of maintaining the same builds as Cobalt did before, because I had no passion around that, and I thought there were a lot of the gun just didn't interest me, and this was kind of my opportunity to build something I wanted to build. And so I did not realize the reputation and the relationships that had either been built or ruined in the previous organization. And so it was a lot slower of a start than I would have wanted. I joke around with people all the time. I didn't know if going into a store after, a dealer somewhere in the first few months, I didn't know if I was going to get a hug or like a punch. And it was that polar opposite. And it was almost 50-50 that, I'd go someplace and you'd hear, I'll never buy a Cobalt. Great guns, but this, that, and whatever. And sometimes I'd be like, well, I'm one of the new owners, and it's a different direction. And there were some places that were like, yeah, we heard that every 6 months, and I'm going, oh, okay, well, I'll come back. You'll see that we are different,
Yeah.
And so it was a lot more of a PR first couple years.
Yeah, that's an uphill battle for sure, I imagine.
Absolutely. And so the slowness there, and then the lack of an ability to market and to advertise and to show everything. I mean, we're so limited. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, but do we? Like, it's really tough to actually gain a market that way, and you can't. YouTube is something we need to really start hammering on, because there still is opportunity there, but that's not my world, and I don't know it that well. So, just that the grind of information is something we battle.
Yeah, and that is certainly not, that's industry wide, right? I think that's something that we are all facing, that, especially over the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, we've had some pretty high profile active shooter incidences, and anytime anything like that happens, and anytime it's election season, and anytime there's an ammo panic, and anytime anything happens, it's just all of a sudden there's this crunch, right? It's a fresh round of talk about regulation, a fresh round of like social media restrictions. It's a constant uphill fight.
Yeah, I mean, I come from the pharmaceutical world, so I'm used to the misrepresentations. I'm used to the misconceptions out there, but it's a different breed when it comes to the firearms world. It's a lot of passion on both sides, and it's just something you weather, and you kind of. I look at it from a position of, okay, it is what it is here, and we, it's the same things over and over that we deal with. Like, how do we start looking at this very differently? How can we attack this and change the perception or the way that we go about it? Removing the passion side, removing the emotion of it. And there are several groups and several people that I've become friends with in the industry that have that same mentality. And so I think there are groups and pieces out there that that are making headway on that front.
Yeah, I tend to think that education is the key, and like you said, kind of trying to remove some of that emotion, and just educating people. I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of misrepresentation. There's a lot of disinformation. I think, you know, overcoming that is, step number one, probably, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to say remove the emotion, but one, you only have control over your emotions. You have no control over anyone else's, and just getting an open ear is that's tough in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. So you had mentioned a little bit about what the brand was, when you took over, and about what the rifles themselves were when you first took over. And I remember the sort of the Gen 1 Cobalt Kinetics rifle. I believe we featured it on the cover of Recoil when it first came out. There were certainly some bold steps in terms of innovation, some stuff that really had not been done before, as much as that expression gets memed to death. But in this case, I think it's accurate. But there was since, let me rephrase this. Since you've taken over, I think that there's been a noticeable pivot from Cobalt Kinetics being a brand that I always perceived as focused on boutique race guns, maybe high end, competitive, all, go fast, and moving in that direction, to what I'm seeing from you guys now, which is a hard step towards what I would call performance focused duty guns, keeping that high level of performance while increasing ruggedness, reliability, however you want to phrase it. What sparked that pivot for you, having coming into the company where, well, the product was already done, basically,
Yeah.
and you kind of wound up doing a lot of stuff. I don't want to say doing stuff over, but you guys made some substantial changes, or have thus
Yeah,
far.
absolutely.
So what
Absolutely.
sparked that?
Well, like I said, when I bought a gun and took it out, like I bought it and drove it over to the range and put a bunch of rounds through it. And, regardless of what people thought about the organization, regardless of what they thought about the way the gun looked, the way the gun felt, firing the gun was different. And it was different, especially at the end of 2014, when Cobalt 1 started. And it really got people's attention. I would tell people that one of the legacies of Cobalt 1 that I wanted to ensure that we maintained was meeting the market where it demanded. And what I mean by that is, in 2014, you saw a lot more, you saw a want for something different than, a standard M4 type rifle. And so, a lot more companies started creating billet-based rifle platforms. You saw a big push and a big time in the 3-gun world, the multi-gun competitive side. It was kind of its heyday. And Cobalt met that need and met that demand where the market was. Now, was it still a niche market, and was it still small? Absolutely. But there was a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around it. And so that's where they did things. The rifles felt really unique. They felt great. There was something about it that was handcrafted, that was that looked at potential. I'm not a huge fan of the word innovation, but there's a lot of directional thought into how to make something work differently, or what can be done to, quiet the buffer system, for example. Focus on a system that tuned the rifle based off of its characteristics, meaning caliber, barrel length, things like that. My problem with it was it was less practical. And I feel like, the structure of old Cobalt, and I try not to speak super negatively about them, because one, it's a little bit difficult at times because of the kind of the hell that I've been through the last couple of years. But two, I have a couple employees that were over there, and they're phenomenal people. And it was not a scenario where I just kept them because it was, I sat down with them. I spent some time, our design engineer in particular, like I contracted with him prior to hiring on, because I did not want the old Cobalt to become the new Cobalt. I didn't want to fall back into that way of thinking and stuff. And I wanted to, identify what frustrations they had, and then make sure that we solved them before we did anything. And so really there's only 3 people in our organization now that were even with the old Cobalt. 2 of them weren't even working for Cobalt at the time. But so having said that, I feel like some of the innovations were left incomplete, unfinished, and had pieces, unintended consequences that weren't thought about. The buffer system, for example, I mean, that's a huge one. And it took 2 years even here to move that into a direction that I felt super comfortable with. But it was overly complicated, but it worked. And so it was one of those things where it's like, this is super complicated. This is very not user friendly. It can be finicky if it's not treated correctly. But it also still, like, it works, and there's a noticeable difference. So how do we attack that from a different side? The other side came down to, yeah, I own the company, but I still shot out my BCM rifles for like the first 4 or 5 months. And, people got angry with me. People were, like, you own this company, you need to have it, like, you need to be shooting and promoting that. And I'm like, just because I own it doesn't mean I think it's where it needs to be. And I'm not gonna promote the rifle in its fullness if I can't get behind it. That's not, I think the best salesmen out there, I think the best representatives out there for an organization are those that have complete confidence and buy in on it. And so I didn't have that at first, and I wasn't going to be a hypocrite on it. And I'd still shoot it occasionally because there's a lot of R&D that went into the direction we're going now. And there's a lot of that legacy that we wanted to carry over, but it was more of, look, Cobalt One wanted to be known as an innovator and an R&D company. And that's great, but we need to focus on the development side there, and we need to bring it back. We need to kind of retro, we need to go backwards in order to rebuild a reputation, gain a reputation of someone who can complete the development side. And then we can be, focused on that R. Like we can then go forward and come out with bolder innovations and bolder introductions into the market, and people will receive it better. So that's kind of the direction we've taken, and we've learned a lot along the way, kind of our processes, what we want to focus on, how we want to focus on them. And we've developed some amazing relationships with manufacturers and people that, we've done some unique things that no one's done before on, in working with those organizations.
So to kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of those points.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So for those folks out there who maybe have a Cobalt One rifle or have some time behind it, or read some of the coverage about it, and they kind of have an idea in their head of what an old Cobalt looked like, ran like, ups, downs, all that. What specific changes, you talked about kind of going back to move forward. So what have you changed? What makes a current Cobalt rifle different? What systems have been revamped? What implementations have you made? To either, like you said, to finish some of that development, or to, try and build a better mousetrap within your own platform.
Yeah. So we started out with attacking the chassis, and we do call it a chassis over a receiver, especially internally, but we're really trying to change the direction there, because we do feel that our platform offers something very unique compared to other, the traditional M4 type. And I had gone to 2020 SHOT Show, and I heard so much talk about different handguards out there, the strength of handguards, and I felt like, yeah, they might be stronger, but it's just a tweak over what's been around for a long time, and it still had some inherent issues that, not. We talk about issues and problems, like you can grab a 6920 Colt and it's going to run, and it's going to work, and it's going to go bang when it needs to, but is it going to go bang in the best way possible? And that's how I kind of approach things. And so context is super important to me when talking about anything controversial or even positive, anything that we discuss. Like I think a big piece of what's missing in our world is context. And so if we can pull what our thoughts are outside of something and just say, okay, what am I actually talking about when we, what is that context? Then it becomes a lot easier to have conversations. And with that being said, I never have felt the barrel attachment piece of an AR was that great. You've got, exposed thread that is about, maybe like about a half inch, a little over a half inch. And to me, that's an inherent weakness for a couple reasons. You've got a lot of action going on. I mean, that's where the round's going to go off. You got an explosion there. You've got moving parts with, engagement and disengagement of lugs of the bolt carrier group. That's now slamming back in and exploding off of it. And everything, weight wise is hanging off of that one area. And so,
yeah, I think that's probably part of the reason that for all the standardization that we do have, all the plug and play ability in the AR platform, there is no standardization for barrel nuts, because everybody's got their own idea of how to optimize that.
Yeah, but it's working. The optimization or the intent to optimize is based off of a standard affixment point. Like, I don't even know if affixment's a word, but it sounds great.
I'll allow it as an editor. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. And so what we did was, so before I get there, I think inherently you've got whatever attaches the barrel or whatever holds the barrel on holds the handguard as well. And so now you're adding accessories on there, whether it be a bipod, light, laser, night vision, thermals, like cross mounting of scopes, all kinds of things that are being attached to something that is attached to your barrel. And you hear this a lot in the PRS world or the precision shooting world. When I barricade, when I put load onto the bipod, when I do anything that puts force onto that handguard, I get a shift in my impact. And so, that there, I call it a slaving. Like the barrel and the handguard are slaved together, and they're both affixed to the same exact thing. So whatever happens to one absolutely happens to the other. So I wanted to deslave that, and we inverted the threads there, and we elongated the receiver, that upper receiver, so that the barrel had, the other side of it is it's all threaded. And so you've got thread run out, you've got the potential for high spots on that surface where the barrel mates and seats. And so, precision builders will lap that face so that it sits on something flush. Well, in my mind, it's not necessary. So we made that little tunnel there. The receiver comes out, barrel sits on a precision milled shelf, and there's no threads that even go to it, because you've got a ton of tolerance that you don't have to have stuff there, because you've got a shoulder of the barrel extension. So barrel sits in there, jam nut goes down, screws in a long way. Yeah, it can take like 30 seconds to screw that bugger down, but it's one of those inconveniences. I'm like, 30 seconds to get performance out of it makes sense. It'll be fine. Excuse me. And that barrel nut is actually 70-75 aluminum. You know, most jam nuts or barrel retaining whatever it is, devices, however you want to say that, they're made of steel, and that steel cutting on the aluminum. I don't like competing materials that are critical. And whether it be because you've got the explosion, you've got heat buildup, you've got all kinds of things going in there. I wanted materials that were identical, so that the expansion contraction was at the same rate, or at least close to the same rate. They're never going to meld together, so it's never going to create like that complete oneness, but it's as close to it as you can get. And then we turn that piece into the handguard mount. Couple things, like there is a downside. The downside is you have to use our handguard. The positive is, if you don't like our handguard, tell us what it is. And, you know, if enough people or the timing is right on it, we can make changes. But to me, the handguard is completely utilitarian. If you want to design in it, like, you know, something funky or like different things, like it's probably not the best upper for you, because for me, I look at it and say you'd rather have aesthetics over performance, and that's not what our rifles are about right now.
Right. That handguard is basically, it is a mounting platform for all the accessories and ancillaries,
and that's all it is. I mean, that when it comes down to it, that's what your handguard is. It's purpose driven, and if it's not purpose driven and it's designed without that in mind, then we're not in a world that you know, there's not a focus that I am focused on right now. Again, we're taking it backwards. We're taking we're taking a step back and focus solely on performance, and then the outcome of that performance or value is what drives the rest of the train. So it's attached to the upper. Anything now that happens to the upper happens, you know, that it's too big of a platform, or it's too big of a mounting surface to have flex that can affect it, or have you know, environmentals that can have effect on, you know, anything attached to it. So there's a little timing piece on that so that it lines up correctly. You've got 8 screws on it in, you know, a concentric pattern. So when that handguard goes on, it's going to go on the same place every time. Even the direction that the threads are cut is such that as you tighten it down, it pulls that in and sucks it in super tight up against the upper receiver. And so, you know, a lot of people look at our guns right now and they call it monolithic, and then they start to realize, oh, like, you can actually take the handguard off and get the stuff. So they start calling it semi-monolithic, and it's like a complete oxymoron, but it actually describes it pretty well. Because you know, it's that old saying, you know, it paints a picture. You can easily understand it. And because it mates together, and because, yeah, you only have one thing, the cool piece was we didn't have to have those thick chunks of Picatinny and try to time it up to, you know, what's it going to work best with. And so when you look down our Picatinny at the top, it's going to be continual. It's going to, like, the aesthetics remain, it flows correctly. We don't have like gaps. We don't have, you know, there's not any offset in the Picatinny. It's all cut on with the same exact tool from, you know, start to finish, so that, you know, you can look down the back end of our receiver and it looks like it's completely monolithic and completely cut in one operation. So there's a lot of benefit that comes from that cross-mounting larger optics.
I was actually going to ask about that specifically, bridging. You know, that's kind of a conventional wisdom says that's a bit of a no-no to bridge from the end of the receiver to the back end of the handguard. Do you guys have? I would imagine that hopefully is a problem you guys have been able to eliminate with this system.
There's zero issue at all. Like there's no flex, there's no torsion bindings that you're going to run into. So that, like, there's no issue. And that's not, like, we looked at everything and said, how does one thing that we're doing, how does each piece affect another? Like, are there any unintended consequences that we haven't thought about? And that's kind of why it's taken 2 years to get the rifle to where we're ready. Like, this is it. Because all of those things have been tested over and over and over, and the consistency of it is there. those are pieces that are super important to me. You shouldn't be limited by, I've got this much space and I'm trying to do X with it. Those are things that technology and experience across the board. We have enough of that now that it shouldn't be as difficult a task as sometimes it is.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, so that's a good, awesome deep dive into the handguard. I know you guys were fresh off NRA, and I know you guys just formally announced the back end, the buffer system upgrade. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
too?
that one's super important to me, and it's one that you've actually experienced. You've been a big part of as well, even from just coming down and spending time with you.
Yeah, well, that's I'm softballing to you, but I'm excited because you offered me the chance to kind of get a look at it, ahead of time, and I personally, that's one of the parts of this, your kind of revision process, that I was pretty excited about. But I'll let you run with it.
Yeah. Man. No. It's been great, and you were there from like the beginning of kind of that dive into it as well. Have been, you've gone out and tested it, the prototypes with us. It's that's been super cool to have, multiple avenues of people in the industry that have had a part and had a say and had an input on what this is. And as I said before, the buffer system, while it worked, and that was always tough because it's like, how do we say something that works? We have to like move off of it and back off of it. But the reality was, it was way more complicated than it needed to be. So how do we more standardize something that has acceptance across the board, but offers more value than what is out there? And Voltor Weapon Systems has hit the nail on the head, as hit it out of the park with their A5 system. It surprises me that, coming off of NRA and coming, from talking with lots of people in the industry, that not everyone knows about the A5 system, and not everyone has, accepted that as better than what's out there. And for those that don't know, it's a buffer that has a 7-position tube instead of a 5 or a 6. It's 3/4 of an inch longer than a standard carbine buffer system, and both in tube and in actual buffer itself. That buffer has 4 weights instead of 3, and it has a little spring in the bottom. And that spring in the bottom helps with consistency. It helps balance out the movement rearward and forward of those weights and the engagement of that on the system. It's something you can super tell when you shoot something full auto. It's a night and day difference. But there were a couple of things that were limiting factors with it, or that I felt like we could have more of a next step to it, or something that offered something a little different. Couple pieces. And so this was like 13 months, I think, from the initial time frame to when we launched it. And Voltor's they've been incredible partners on it. And we've had, like, our relationship has grown immensely because of it. Brandon down there has become like a really good friend, as well as, someone that, it's been interesting because, I'll come up with an idea, or I'll come up with something that I want to address, and he just starts laughing. He's like, I was thinking the same thing. I've done this, is how I've done it, or this is how I've looked at it. And like the pieces, so nothing is 100% like just my thought or just my take on it, because it's been truly collaborative. And so essentially, oh, you know what, I have one right here. So it's right here, and this is the A5, but it's got this little feature on the front that is we call it an anti-tilt / preload feature. And why we call it that is, yes, our guns are DI. They don't have the same issues with like the buffer system or with carrier tilt, like as you do with like a piston gun. but that's not really the full point of the anti-tilt. We don't have, piston bumping in and knocking that carrier off that way. What you do have though is you have a flat on a flat. You got the flat end of the buffer system, or the buffer cap, and you have the flat end of the carrier group, and those flats create vibration. They create a wobble, and as that's coming back, and you got your gas coming in this way,
Like they're kind of like sliding against each
Yeah,
other as they're moving.
Yeah, there's no affixment. There's nothing that keeps them together, and so you get this wobble as it goes down the buffer tube, or the lower extension itself. And so this sits inside a little bit of a carrier, and the unique piece is the where it sits. It doesn't just sit on here and flush on the shoulders here. It sits on this angle, and why that's important is it might seem small, and it is a small amount, but you get a little bit of a preload, a little bit of a push onto the buffer, and preloading that spring, so that when you get that disengagement of the lugs of the carrier itself, you don't have as much of a slap or a contact that's made off of that. The contact's already there, and so it comes back as a bit of a push instead of a slap. And it's, again, it's a small amount, but it's absolutely noticeable, and you can feel it just by putting it in there. So that piece is very cool, very unique. There are other designs out there, and if you go like on a patent search on an anti-tilt or a buffer system, there's lots of them out there. Cobalt had it on theirs. In the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, they were selling it. There's others out there. If you actually go back into history and look at like really deep dive into the platform itself, in 1956 there was a buffer that was used that had a bulbous cap on it for that specific reason. And so we don't look at this and say it's more or less innovative. We say this is a piece that was actually an intentional part of the AR, the M4, the M16 history. And so bringing that back and having data and justification behind it's been super, super cool. But yeah, that piece, very, very much, you can feel the difference right away. You've got 5 different weights for these, from an H0 to an H4. On that, the H4 is going to be 8-ish ounces on that side. But one of the frustrations that I have is, and we talk about tuning a rifle, being able to, we've got like 5.5 inch barrels now, all the way up to, we have a 22-inch barrel, and we have multiple calibers, all running off of a small frame AR type platform. And if we're going to change weights, if we're going to change gas port sizes, if we're going to change calibers, if we're going to change all of those things, gas tube lengths, this system only comes with one spring. And, you got a mil spec spring, and you've got like a spring coat green that is traditionally used in it. And they're essentially the same, not exactly the same, but the differences are so small, but that we can just call them one spring tension, things like that. But then you look at the carbine spring world, and you've got a plethora. You've got, Geisy Super 42. You've got 6 or so options from Springco. You've got the mil spec side. We have had at Cobalt, we've had our own, we got 4 of those different springs, but nothing, you have one on this side. And like, if you're going to make a change to a system, you need to be able to make a change to the entire system. And so, crap, I don't actually have one here. Maybe I should have prepared a little better. There's actually, we have a collar, and it's a slip fit sleeve collar, however you want to say it, that goes over this, that takes out, I mentioned it's 3/4 of an inch here. The collar actually has a little bit, the dimensions a little bit more. And what that does is it elongates the shoulder, the back shoulder here where the spring sits. And it solves a couple of things. One, it allows you to use any carbine spring on an A5 system. The other thing is it fills this space up too. So you've got a lot more surface contact with the tube. and it quiets the system down quite a bit noticeably and smooths it out. You know, in talking with some people, you know, anytime you go grab an AR off a wall or grab an AR and you start to, you know, activate that charging handle, pull it back, you hear the spring, you hear the movement, you hear that grindiness, and it's not awesome.
The old carbine twang.
Yeah, that twang, you can, and then like when you fire a gun, sometimes if it's not exactly what it should be, you get that like that spring vibration where you hear the boing like going on, and but that allows you to solve that, and it allows, like, it's super noticeable. But being able to adjust all of those things, we don't use adjustable gas blocks. That's one of the changes we made. Inherently, adjustable gas blocks don't last over time. You know, we're going to focus on the gas port size being the correct size, so that you're not having to pinch it off. You're not having to create, you know, add another element of breakdown, because they all break down. You know, if you've got a screw tensioner that goes in there, gosh, you put 100 rounds through it, you're never moving that thing. It's carbon locked in there. And so now you just have premature breakdown over time, and you got to replace everything after that. So if you want to adjust your, you know, whether you're shooting suppressed, unsuppressed, or you just want a super smooth rifle, adjust it from the back, adjust it from something that you can actually replace and mess with over time. So that's, you know, those are two very key components of what we did. Like, we've had a lot of ancillary benefits out of it. Like, we don't use C-clips on our port doors, dust cover doors. You know, the austere environments. I mean, we live in a super like sandy, gross desert. You know, you do too down there, and you don't want to get that gunk in there. So many procedures when you go to like a rifle class, you've got, you know, closed dust cover. That's part of your process in how things are taught. And so ours, it goes into a little hole in underneath the handguard, set in place by a set screw, and then you trap that set screw with the handguard. So you're not going to lose your you know, your port door on that side. You know, we talked about the barrel engagement. You know, you can go into any store that has our guns, grab it off the wall, and try to like crank that barrel, like grab it on the end and just try to wiggle it. You're not going to get it because it's extremely rigid, and that platform just sucks it in super tight. It allows the barrel, and we're very particular on the barrels we use, it allows that barrel to get its maximum potential because it's in a fixed spot. You're going to get less barrel whip. Follow-up shots are going to be faster. And yeah, you know, I actually encourage people to do that. Like, go crank on that. And people ask, well, is it still free float? It's actually more free float than any standard AR platform can be, because it's not holding on to a handguard. It's not slave to that handguard. So it is truly free float, you know, outside of the gas tube touching. But that's got enough tolerance that it's still floating. It might be touching, but it's still floating. So yeah, just a lot of benefits out of that.
That on the front of that buffer, you were saying that the carrier rests at a bit of an angle. Does that preload the spring? Does that actually preload the buffer spring a little bit?
Yeah.
You know?
That was the intention.
Right. So the spring is not starting from zero.
Yes, it's not. Yeah, it's not starting from zero. It's starting from, you know, 1%, like 0.1% or whatever that is. It's a little bit, but it's noticeable. I just started laughing because I grabbed this one to show, because there is a piece of it that, you know, if you start to use it, you're gonna be like, is something wrong? These are anodized aluminum parts. That anodizing is going to wear if you get, you know, if someone an out of spec upper that someone's had, you're going to get like marks on it from like the retainer pin on there. So that stuff's normal, but actually the one I grabbed to show this, you'll get a kick out of this too. It's got some pings and like little dents on the top of it from not having a particular tool to remove a sleeve down in Tucson. And I borrowed a hammer from the back of your truck.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
but it actually shows kind of what I'm talking about there. You can see where that anodizing, that shiny spot on the actual angle itself, that's where the carrier sits, and that's where it's supposed to sit to get that preload. So that part will get a little boogery, and it's aesthetically, is it a downside?
The gun's meant to run,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, for sure. So with all of that in mind, right, all these changes that you guys have taken hard looks at and done your best to develop to their fullest, right? So if we step off of the Cobalt chassis specifically, because this is obviously something you've spent a lot of time on, in your opinion, broad strokes, general terms, what makes a great AR-15?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's
It's
broad
a
strokes.
preloaded question. I get that.
Yeah,
but
well, it comes after me saying context is everything. So thank you. Like, pull context out. A great AR-15 goes bang when it needs to, and that's something you can rely on, because the truth of it is it's a machine that is intended to save a life and quite possibly take a life. And in that moment, the only thing that matters is that it goes bang. If we add a little bit more to that, I would say that the result of that bang needs to be predictable and consistent. And what I mean by that is you need to know that after that first shot, because one shot rarely takes care of anything, that follow-up shot is very dependent on that consistency and that predictability. Is the gun going to move a specific way? Well, if it's going to move a specific way, I better know where that's going to be and how I need to either position it or my body. So I think first and foremost, it has to go bang when it needs to. And then you have to know how it's going to go bang.
Makes sense, right? Accuracy and reliability is kind of what it boils down to, regardless of your application, right?
100%.
So you mentioned working with Viltor specifically on the back end stuff. You've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate that you've allowed me to kind of take a look at some of this stuff and for you to bounce some ideas off me in the past. And so let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit, right? One of the challenges you talked about earlier was sort of restructuring the perception of the brand. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other manufacturers that you've partnered with, some of the other SMEs that you guys have started to work with as a brand and move with through the industry. Tell us a little bit about some of the people you've worked with to help you test these rifles, provide feedback, and also through that have become essentially de facto representatives of the brand itself.
Yeah, like they become family. They truly have, because one thing that we focus on is the if you're going to be here, if you're going to give input, like, you're part of the process. And so we started out, and very, very few people know about this side. I'm kind of just putting it out there, and we'll talk about it more from the Cobalt side as we go. But there's a former special operations guy by the name of Rick Hogg. He's got a company, Warhog Tactical. He does a lot of training and stuff. He was actually the first SME that we spent time with, utilized. He's one of the very first people to get one of the very, very first rifles that went out in November of 2020. And he's been the most critical, the most honest. And when I say honest, like raw honesty, like zero concern for like my feelings, anyone's feelings. And it's those are the people that I go after. And I want someone who's going to like not bullshit me at any turn. Like, if there's a problem, if there's an issue, if there's a preference, they're going to tell me without any regard for like tact. And I'm not saying that he's not a tactful person, or that anyone that we work with doesn't have tact, but I don't ask for that. I ask for like, give me what you think, period. And he's given so much input in aesthetic wise, like small features wise, that I look and I see on the rifle today, and it's like Rick's name's all over that thing. And because of who he is and where he came from, it wasn't something we talked about much with people because, it's a process to develop something. And without the full context behind it, I don't want people to have weird thoughts or a thought that isn't correct on that. So, but he's been a massive part. Kawa Malay, former Green Beret. He was our first kind of public person that started working with us. Shortly after that, John Dufresne, Mocha Bear, Duffy, a man of many names, and limited preference on food with desserts, mostly cookies and ice cream.
Yep.
Joe Farewell, incredibly successful and talented competitive shooter that has a law enforcement background. That blend of duty, competition to duty grade or duty capable rifle. He's been incredibly helpful on bridging that gap. Ray Helms, X-Ring channel on YouTube. He works with Microtech knives, but is 30-year law enforcement guy, SWAT sniper, incredibly successful multi-gun competitor as well as PRS shooter. I mean, Precision World. He is a big deal there, and he's a guy that again has a very strong opinion on things, and he's not afraid to tell it like he sees it. And that kind of input's been, so our SPR line, he's had massive input on that. Chris Way, another precision shooter that doesn't come from the shooting world or the tactical world, that comes from a very much, he got into the sport and loves the sport, but he excels at it because he's, very science-based, very, very context-driven, and doesn't care what, is the way that it has been done. More recently, Don Edwards with Greenline Tactical, and he brings a whole slew of instructors on his side that takes the platform from a daytime shooting rifle to a nighttime shooting rifle, and does everything apply correctly there. And then we brought on people to work with us. Mike Paez, that was with Sons of Liberty for the last 6 years, and the QC side of things, the quality that's coming out the door, that's what he's responsible for now. And he's, I knew that he wouldn't take crap coming out the door as acceptable. Gabe Cabrera, he does the revenue side, the marketing and sales side. That's, marketing's his world. And where Cobalt had a shaky reputation, I wanted someone who came from the marketing side, the brand reputation, the brand side itself, to run the sales side. I don't care that, we start out selling whatever the number of rifles we need to. That was never, that to me is a recipe for frustrated customers, frustrated dealers, frustrated end users on that side. So I wanted someone who would attack that world with a focus on the brand. Like, we can do X as long as it doesn't, get us in a bad spot where the quality could go down or someone's expectations isn't there. The manufacturers we work with, we choose them very carefully. We work with Roscoe Manufacturing on our Pro Series barrels. And the reason being, they make a phenomenal product and incredible value, but consistency is better there than I've seen with most people. And I don't have years and years of experience on things, but it's the experience that I have with the brands that I do, and they've been not only a great provider of parts, but the consistency that they have, and then the partnership that we've created has been amazing. I mentioned Voltor, same thing. They come with an incredible reputation, but they've also been just phenomenal partners. Proof Research on the SPR line. I was always skeptical on carbon fiber barrels, and I've always been concerned about consistency that comes out. That's again, consistency is absolutely paramount. And I've learned so much from them because they're an aerospace company. Like, their engineers have reason behind everything. And, I've learned things about the carbon fiber world and how that interacts with steel and how the bonding process actually works, the wrap works. And so I work with people that can not only provide what I'm looking for, but also educate me and are willing to share and educate me to better be an expert on what I'm putting into my guns and what I'm, putting out there, saying, putting my name on, putting out there saying, no, you should absolutely trust this, and giving me that understanding, so that, one day I become a subject matter expert on anything that goes out my door.
Super important. I think, we talked a little bit before about this industry being full of people who are, passionate and or SMEs in their own right, and that's what brought them here on the professional level. But you do, just like in any other industry, right? There are still, not everyone is an expert on their own products, and that's that's really important. So
Yeah.
to,
We get one more. Sorry.
no, that's fine. Please go ahead.
I was going into this. In the one super, like a very special relationship we have is with Condition One Group out of Miami. It's a training group that is their focus, that is their whole mission, and they focus really on a niche inside of that world, and in the CQB side of things. But they also do precision shooting, they do basic rifle, pistol, all of those things, but they have a really big focus on the CQB world. All the instructors, the owners, they're former tier 1 guys, and they bring that different, we got Don on the night side, we've got Duffy that is just as big a deal on the night fighting side, but then also has, he's always teaching on that side, bringing that CQB side of things in, as well as being, a retailer in kind of a focus point there. They've been super instrumental, as well as, we've had a long relationship with them. And so giving that, they have everyone that we work with has an innovative side. They all aren't afraid to do something new, do something that hasn't been there. And so our testing evaluation side, we've got so many people doing it, and so many people running things that, they just happen to have quite a few people, and then they see a lot of people and let them shoot this stuff. So we get the feedback that they have as professionals, as well as the instruction that they give to people that are brand new, and saying, hey, I like this because of this. How do you like it as a newer shooter, as someone who's learning some of this stuff? And that's what we're being able to cater and be dynamic in how we develop stuff, hitting every single aspect of professional to newbie. And that's been super cool.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up using your SMEs to interface with newer shooters. It sets me up really well for my next question, which is this. So you got to imagine at least some of the folks tuning in are either already Cobalt consumers, or were Cobalt consumers in the past, or are prospective consumers of your product. What do you want to tell them about what's coming next from Cobalt?
What's coming next? What's coming next is it's not a break from R&D and movement, but it will be a break from major changes or what's coming in a big way, because the rifle's done. Like our journey for Cobalt 2.0 has a platform that is, like, I'm 100% confident in it, and I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that gimmicky or to push anything out there. I truly am 100% confident in any of the guns that I carry with me, or that I have around, because it's been a process that has been brutal, like, to get through, but brutal on the firearms themselves. We test them a lot. And so it's time for that piece to shine, and for that that final product to get out there and be able to mature in the market. And so you probably won't see a platform change. We have an what we call an XL platform, a large frame AR platform, 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, other calibers. coming out, absolutely we do. Like it's the designs are done, the concepts are being vetted, but it's probably going to be a little bit of time before that's out in the market. We'll have little things here and there, but there's going to be a maturing side, and letting that product out there and it be the focus. What you can expect as a customer is that our door's always open, our email's always answered, and our phone is, I'm not gonna say always gotten to because we are busy, but if you leave a message, we'll always get back with you. We love hearing feedback from the consumers, and we love getting input and suggestions from them. Look, at the end of the day, it's a machine, and it's a machine that's handcrafted and put together by one person. And so, you know, if there's ever an issue like a Cerakote is not, you know, you got a dry spot here or there, or you've got, you know, whatever is an issue, or whatever concerns as a consumer you would have, like we're going to take care of you. All of our products come with a lifetime warranty, and it's not a limited lifetime warranty. If you feel like something isn't up to where it needs to be, or you're not 100% satisfied, you better believe we're gonna make that right. The reputation of the brand is super important to me. But again, at the end of the day, the gun has to go bang when it needs to, and you as a consumer have to have that confidence in that platform to do so. Because if the gun goes bang but you don't have confidence, it's not an efficient system. You've got to have that complete confidence and efficiency that you know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and when you want it to happen. And so we love our customers to be part of that same family. You know, I think that's something that's always been missing in our space. We talk about the 2A community, and the community aspect of it is often overlooked, and it's a we versus them, or it's a, you know, they don't care because they're so big. That's not us, and it won't ever be us. We're about building this community. We're about building onto a value to the industry, to the Second Amendment. And as a consumer, you're just as much part of that as we are.
So where do we go if we want to look up more information?
www. I don't think we need to say that anymore, actually. So cobaltkinetics.com, all one word, COBALTKINETICS.com. You can kind of follow our journey on Instagram at Cobalt Kinetics, all one word. We were fortunate enough to be able to get that. And, you know, the previous one was Cobalt.Kinetics, but do not be confused by that. It is at Cobalt Kinetics, all one word. You know, our phone number's it might be on there. It's for sure on our website. Call us, email us. My email is Aaron, AARON, at cobaltkinetics.com. I love hearing from people. I love answering questions. I love talking about the product, as I've kind of dominated a lot of conversation today. So I love discussing it. I love discussing the journey and the results and what we've been able to accomplish. We are going to be doing some YouTube videos, you know, we talked earlier in the conversation about education. There's a lot of education missing, and it's been held back a lot. You know, you want to talk about springs, you want to talk about like how the buffer system works, the science behind it, and what's necessary for it. I'm going to give you all of that. I'm going to give you a way to identify and look up spring rates and dimensions of springs that are critical in a functioning platform. And so not really going to be the guy to tell you how to build a gun. Lots of people out there, lots of videos, lots of ways to do that, but it's going to be about education. And that's a big piece that's going to be coming, is education on what makes the platform work and why it needs to. And yeah, that's something I'm super excited about.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I'm sure you have 1,000 other things on your plate, so getting to spend this time with you has been great. And I really appreciate you taking the time to really let us take a hard look and a deep dive into the Cobalt brand and where you guys came from and where you guys are heading. So once again, I'm Tom Marshall. This has been Aaron Quinn with Cobalt Kinetics. And thank you so much for tuning into Recoil Live, and we'll see you next time.